Imagine a nation of over 1 billion people, a place with an incredibly vibrant sporting culture, yet somehow it remains almost entirely invisible on the world's absolute biggest sporting stage. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into a fascinating data-driven journey. We're going to track the rise, the staggering fall, and the meticulously planned resurrection of Indian football. It's a wild story, really, full of colonial resistance, systemic collapse, and now a really bold new blueprint for the future. And that brings us to the central mystery we're going to unravel today. How exactly does a country that once absolutely dominated Asian football, a team that literally reached the semifinals of the Olympic Games, find itself sitting at 138th in the world decades later? I mean, what actually went wrong here? And much more importantly, what's being done right now to fix it? Well, to really understand all this, we need to go back to the beginning.
Section 1. Origins and the Golden Era. To understand the present, we first need to explore the surprisingly deep, century-old historical roots of the sport in the subcontinent.
So, football actually arrived via British regiments back in the 19th century, but the locals adopted it incredibly fast. Picture this. In 1888, the Durand Cup is established, making it the third oldest football tournament in the entire world. Then, by 1911, an Indian club named Mohun Bagan did the unthinkable. They famously defeated a British military team while playing barefoot. That moment turned the sport into a massive symbol of national pride and resistance. And that passion built up to a true golden era under a visionary coach named Syed Abdul Rahim. Between 1951 and 1962, India won 2 Asian Games gold medals and achieved a historic 4th-place finish at the 1956 Melbourne Olympics. They were, without a doubt, the undisputed kings of Asian football.
Now, you might be wondering about the 1950 World Cup. There's this super famous myth floating around that India withdrew because FIFA wouldn't let them play barefoot. But the objective historical data tells us a very different story. The withdrawal was actually largely because of the insanely high travel costs to get all the way to Brazil. Plus, there was a real lack of scientific awareness from the Federation at the time about the importance of these global tournaments and modern equipment. Basically, the rest of the world was professionalizing, and India was hesitating.
Section 2. The Great Decline. That early hesitation, unfortunately, soon turned into a period of deep, institutional stagnation. You see, the decline wasn't because of a sudden lack of talent on the pitch. The failure was completely structural. Over the following decades, India just didn't build systematic youth academies. The physical infrastructure, like the stadiums and training pitches, literally began to crumble. On top of that, ongoing governance issues within the All India Football Federation, the AIFF, really hindered any sort of long-term planning. And we can't ignore the elephant in the room, the meteoric rise of cricket. Cricket grew to dominate a staggering 80% of all sports viewership in the country. That massive shift left legacy football clubs completely starved of both financial investment and media visibility. To put the sheer magnitude of this stagnation into perspective, just look at the numbers. Going from standing 4th in the world at the 1956 Olympics down to 138th in the modern FIFA rankings. It really highlights the heavy cost of ignoring grassroots development while the rest of the footballing world was rapidly accelerating. Section 3. Restructuring the domestic leagues. Recognizing this massive structural gap, modern commercial efforts finally began attempting to fix things, bringing us to a major turning point.
Back in 2014, the Indian Super League, the ISL, was launched to inject some desperately needed commercial viability back into the sport. But for years, it operated purely as a closed franchise model. There was no real sporting jeopardy. Finally, starting in the 2025-2026 season, the top-tier ISL and the second-tier IFL are being officially connected through a live promotion and relegation system. This is absolutely huge. It means legacy clubs finally have a direct sporting pathway right up to the top table, creating some real competitive stakes for the first time in years.
But let's pause and think critically about this for a second. Can a top-down franchise league actually replace bottom-up grassroots development? Well, the evidence strongly suggests no. While the ISL definitely brought a temporary spike in visibility and cash, it simply couldn't instantly solve the really deep-seated systemic issues that were still actively plaguing the national team.
Section 4. The Current Reality, Highs and Lows. Which brings us squarely to the present day, where we need to take a really balanced, objective look at where Indian football stands right now.
138. That is the current FIFA ranking for the men's national team. It's definitely a tough number for the fans to swallow, though it is very much worth noting that the women's national team is currently performing a lot better on the global stage, sitting pretty at 69th in the world. But make no mistake, both programs are facing immense uphill battles.
The reality is, you just can't build a great team on a broken foundation. Recently, the Federation went through a really severe governance crisis. In 2022, the Supreme Court of India actually had to intervene in the AIFF's operations, and that directly led to a temporary suspension by FIFA for undue third-party interference. When you combine that administrative chaos with disconnected regional youth systems and a severe lack of funding outside that top-tier ISL, it became universally clear to everyone involved. A massive, totally transparent reconstruction of the entire footballing ecosystem was no longer optional. It was absolutely mandatory.
Section 5. The Vision for 2047. Out of that intense crisis, a highly ambitious new blueprint was born. This is where the narrative shifts from past failures to future possibilities.
Enter Vision 2047. This is the AIFF's brand new data-driven master plan, and it's specifically timed to culminate on the exact centennial of India's independence. This is definitely not a quick fix. Unfolding across 6 consecutive 4-year phases, the initial goal is purely stabilization. But the ultimate goal at the end of the tunnel? To elevate India into a top 4 Asian footballing nation by the year 2047.
Structurally, it's a massive overhaul. The men's pyramid expands out to 40 professional teams across 3 national tiers, while the women's game receives a dedicated, robust 4-level pyramid of its own. The core purpose of this whole structure is mathematically simple but practically vital. They want to guarantee that every single professional player logs a minimum of 55 competitive matches every single season.
And the sheer scale of the administrative targets here is mind-blowing. The Federation is aiming to educate 50,000 active licensed coaches. They're planning to actively engage 35 million children in grassroots football across local villages and schools. Plus, they want 100 professional clubs operating nationwide, all supported by 30 brand-new FIFA-standard stadiums. It is a complete, ground-up rebuild of the sports infrastructure.
Section 6. The Path Forward. Because administrative goals and shiny new stadiums don't actually win football matches. Players do. So what needs to happen on the training pitch?
Let's look closely at the science of modern player development. According to fascinating insights from FIFA's Chief of Global Football Development, the legendary manager Arsène Wenger, the modern game has completely moved beyond just raw physical fitness. The elite players of the future require an entirely different cognitive skill set.
Wenger identifies a few totally non-negotiable competencies. First up, players have to develop 3-dimensional vision. That's the ability to see depth and actually break defensive lines with a single pass. Second, elite players process vast amounts of visual information in the 10 seconds before they even touch the ball. Third, absolutely flawless technique is required because your feet have to instantly execute what your brain just processed. And finally, immense tactical flexibility to adapt under extreme pressure. This is the exact curriculum that these new Indian academies simply have to adopt.
But to reach that level of technical mastery, India really has to look at its successful Asian neighbors. Right now, India suffers from really fragmented regional growth. A wildly talented kid in one state might literally never be seen by a national scout. Contrast this with Japan and South Korea. There, football youth academies are seamlessly integrated directly into the national school curriculum, backed by massive government support. For India to actually pull this off, the classroom and the pitch must become totally interconnected.
So, this leaves us with a pretty profound question. The blueprints are drawn up, the history has been acknowledged, the structural changes to the domestic leagues are finally underway. But at the end of the day, execution is everything. Will this 25-year plan finally awaken the sleeping giant of global football, or will it remain just another really nice-looking administrative dream on paper?
The stakes are clearly defined by the Federation itself. Vision 2047 hopes that in the country's 100th year of independence, India will be among the top 4 footballing nations in Asia. It's a massive promise. And it's made not just to the current generation of frustrated fans, but to the future of the entire nation's sporting identity. From the barefoot legends of 1911 defying the odds, to the high-tech, data-driven academies of tomorrow, Indian football stands at its absolute most critical crossroads right now. The raw talent has always been there, just waiting in the wings. But ambition on paper now have to survive the brutal reality of actual execution. Will this 25-year blueprint finally awaken a sleeping giant, or is India destined to remain a spectator in the world's beautiful game? We'll have to wait and see, but the clock to 2047 is officially ticking.